Hey everybody, this is Matthew Soltesiak and you're listening to Not the Same Old Lions podcast. Using my sportscasting background, I speak with a variety of guests and interview key players to gain more insight on what makes this team go. As the Detroit Lions enter a new gritty era, we'll look beyond just the kneecaps when it comes to the analysis. Welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the upcoming draft, how expectations and needs may have changed, as well as what the organization might be looking for when it comes to bringing in new players on board. I'm joined by Coach Jerry Angers, named Michigan High School Coach of the Year, as well as Coach of the Week by the Detroit Lions. He's also mentored numerous players at the college level and some all the way to the NFL. Good to have you here, Coach.
Great to be here, Matt.
So, I'm talking draft with you here, Coach Angers. Let's talk about what teams look for when they bring in new players. Let's start there. It takes place in free agency as well as through the draft. Now, you brought new players into a program before, and what are some important things to consider when bringing a new player into an existing team?
Well, I think metrics and stuff like that's great. I mean, we see, they're fast, or they're great athletes, or they got these highlight videos, but what do they do behind the scenes? What kind of leadership are they? How well do they get along with people? Are they going to fit into the program? There's a lot of stuff to it. You can, anytime you look at these players, how are they going to get along? A lot of the things, college level, those guys come in, they meet the staff, they meet the players, the players give you a feedback on it. It'd be nice if you could go into each household, which the pros do. I mean, the pros have their interviews to find out, what's behind the scene, to find out how great of a teammate he was. What do they do? Do they practice every down like it's their last one and stuff like that? So I think those are the biggest things they look at, and, how are they going to fit in, of course, to the X's and O's, and how are they going to make the team better with that?
Now, do the dynamics sometimes change just by adding a player or two to an existing team?
Well, I think so. I think you got a kid that or a young adult, I should say, that goes into a program, and they didn't really fit in at their high school, or didn't really fit in at their college level, but we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And then they walk in and they get a great connection with the coach, and it's huge. It's a great connection with the coach, great connection with the strength conditioning guy, and then all of a sudden they realize, well, I can do this, and of course maturity jumps in pretty quick, and we all know that males aren't as mature as females at this point.
Yes, we do mature a little bit.
Yes.
So when you get that new player in, what does it take to get a new player to form a bond with the team, to develop that camaraderie? Because the Lions have all been about culture, and if we're talking about that leads right into this. And what are things, or what does it take to get a team ready over this short period of time to be bonded and ready to go for the season?
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with the questions they answer. The questions that they're given. You look at the draft last year, between Hutch and Thibodeau. I mean, Hutch was all about a team player and wanting to make the Lions better, and he's from Michigan and all those things where, some of the other guys, whether it's Thibodeau or any of those other guys, mentioned, well, I don't know what my brand is going to be, and I think that's one of the biggest things we look at, and that's what people have to look at is, what is their brand? Are they here for the reasons of this team, whether it's the Lions or the Saginaw Valley State University Cardinals or Central Michigan Chippewas or any of those, and are they going to fit into that brand, and are they there for the long run and long haul?
That makes a lot of sense. So let's start with free agency here. The Lions have brought in a number of players this offseason. As a coach, you're looking at talent, but there's also talk about that culture fit. So can you speak to that and how that plays out when the Lions are looking at free agents, or a team's looking at free agents and who they want to bring in there? A lot of fans say, they look at the stats and what the player can do.
Right.
But that only tells part of the story.
Right. Yeah, the leadership. What's their leadership? Again, you go back to the X's and O's and how are they on the field and off the field. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you look at with these guys. You look at, now we have guys that want to be here in Detroit. Before it was, nobody wants to go to Detroit. Nobody wants, the same old Lions, I think is what we're talking about all the time. And now these guys are saying, I want to be a part of that. I remember one of the broadcasters afterwards, after somebody had one of our free agents, and he said, I've talked to players that said, we want to play for Dan Campbell. And I think that's the thing. And they understand what he's all about. And they know that they're going to get pushed to the limit, but they're also, it's going to be very successful when it's all said and done.
So the Lions are in a unique position, but they're in this position where they have a younger team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And so having a young team on defense, does that affect your ability of players you can bring in?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, you have to look at it. You want to, you got all these young players. I think we're the youngest team, correct, or second youngest team, and you want to bring in some veterans. I mean, that's kind of what they did in the defensive backfield. Bring in some of those veteran guys that have been around and can help train them, help teach them, what's right and wrong. It's a growing thing. I mean, I look at our season last year. We were 1-6. We're the youngest team in the NFL. Yeah, we should be 1-6. And what happened as they started maturing and understand the concepts of the game? So I think there's a fine line between being extremely young and a fine line with being extremely old, any place in the middle. But anytime you can get older leadership on either side of the ball, it's going to help out.
Now, you talked about that, the youth of our team last year, and we saw them get better as the year went on, which is one of the reasons right now, even if you just brought back the exact same team, we would expect even more out of them this coming season. They made a lot of upgrades on the defensive side of the ball, especially in the secondary. We even brought in Cam Sutton, a veteran, to add to that. And some philosophies would say you need more of a veteran team if you're going to bring in a player who might have a reputation for not being easy to work with. But the Lions have been building this culture up. They brought in some veterans, but they also have some players that are developing into veterans. So if there's a player you like out there because of their skill set, but they might have that reputation of, I don't know if they're the easy person to work with, but they are a great player, how do you weigh that when bringing them in?
Well, I think that goes back in the past, what they did even prior to the NFL. What were they like in college? Maybe it was just a bad mix. Maybe there was a concern or problem amongst the coach and the player. Maybe there was a player on the team that for some reason they couldn't get along. Those are all things that, those all come into play here. And then you weigh all your decisions and ideas on what you're going to do with this certain player. Again, if my feeling is if they say, I want to be a part of this, I need a change, I need to, then let's bring them in and see what they can do for us. If there's a ton of red flags, then, they're probably not going to make it. But if there's just a few, everybody has issues and problems out there, and they're always looking for the right culture to turn them around to be the best that they can be.
Well, that's the other thing. A lot of fans see the headlines. They see the 5-word headlines and the 2-paragraph stories.
Yeah.
But those 2-paragraph stories or 4-paragraph stories rarely tell the full story.
Correct.
And there's, like you said, we all have stuff we deal with at night. And you don't always know the full details, and you're not always going to, because you know what? People have privacy in their lives too, and there are lots of things that go into a situation or an equation.
Right.
So let's turn to the NFL draft. These are players you're going to add to your team. It's similar to adding a free agent, but it's different because these players have A, never played at this level before, and B, you're adding them to the culture of the team. So you know even less about their play at the NFL level. If it's a free agent, you can look at their free agent tape, you know how they played last year at the NFL. So there's more adjustments that are coming in, and these young adults are transitioning from college life to being an adult and having a full-time job. So there's a lot more moving pieces. So what do you think coaches are looking for when they're preparing for the draft and they're putting their draft boards together?
Well, I think they're looking at background checks, interviews, and again, I think those are all things. How is this person going to handle all of a sudden having $1 million in their bank account, or they're making X amount of dollars, a week, and what are they going to do with that? And I think that's one of the things they look for. We look at our draft last year, Rodrigo, and you look at Houston. We could talk about our number 1 draft, of course, pick. We knew where he was going to be at, but for them to find these guys in the 5th and 6th round of guys that are going to fit into the culture of this program, and then are they going to hurt the program when they get down? And I think that's one of the biggest things that Holmes and Dan Campbell and them do is a great background check. I think they find out what this person is all about and what makes this person go. And I think that's the big thing they're looking for. Everybody that's projected to be an NFL draft pick is an athlete, or they wouldn't be picked to be an NFL draft pick. But it's the small, integral parts that if we can make those the right ones, then they're gonna fit into the team.
That makes a lot of sense. And going through and doing that deep digging is what's important. So let's talk about some top talent and maybe a big question mark. The biggest name everyone's been talking about for weeks now is Jalen Carter. Now, we don't know all the facts about his situation. We're not going to. But let's look at some things. If you are an NFL team, how are you approaching this? There's two issues, right? There's the legal issues of things, and then there's the fact that he showed up in worse shape at that pro day.
Right.
So how do those things weigh in?
Well, I think they're a big way. The one thing we've been talking about it with friends and fellow coaches and stuff like that, and players, about him saying, I'm only going to interview with teams that are in the top 10 picks. Well, if you interview with them all, can somebody move up in the draft to be a top 10 pick? And I think those are things that are going to raise some flags. Again, we don't know everything. What all we know is what we read in the paper or on Twitter. If Coach Smart comes out and says he's one of the best guys I've ever had, and he's done the best thing, and then his high school coach says the same thing, and then his position coach says the same thing, then maybe there's some issues or problems back there that they can work with. But it all has to go hand in hand. It's like when we drafted Hutch last year, it was a home run. We knew it because of every answer, everything we read about him. You didn't see any negatives, and again, any negatives in the paper are tenfold. We don't see enough of the positives.
That is true, and you're right. The Lions are doing their homework. It's possible that Jalen Carter did not want to continue to answer some of those same questions over and over more than 10 times. So I can see both sides of why he maybe didn't want to do more interviews. But if a team really is interested in you, they might want to trade into that top 10 like we've talked about. So the legal issue aspect will take care of itself one way or another. How concerned are you about his physical condition for that pro day?
Well, I think that's another thing too. They get guys that come in all the time and have a test poorly, like we talked about on the combine before. Does the pro day, does the running and the agility drills and stuff match the film? And in this case, probably not. But also on film, you're watching him dominate in certain situations. I mean, I still think about the play when he sacked the quarterback and just picked him up and raised his other hand in the air to say he's down. Blow the whistle. I mean, those are things you watch on a guy like that. So again, everything's got to play itself out with him and anybody else that we're looking for. And that's what the Lions front office and coaching staff will come up with the right answer. And no matter what they do, if they take a guy like that or somebody like that, we know there's a great reason why they took him or didn't take him.
And so, the Lions could be looking at Jalen Carter at that 6th spot. He is arguably the most talented player in the draft. And he fits the arguably biggest need for the Detroit Lions right in the middle of a defensive line. So, under what circumstances do you think the Lions should take him? And Wendy, under what circumstances would it make sense for the Lions to pass on him?
Well, I think the Lions are gonna take the best player available on the board that's going to fit into their system, and if it's a player that's a position that we need some backups in, or a player that can come in and start, and then our starter's the backup, they're going to make that choice. They're going to do whatever they can do to make the team better and not hurt the team. So I think that's going to come into a lot of play. Are they? I mean, sometimes I look at them and think they're going to package a deal to trade up to get the exact person they want, and they may, he may be it. He may be the guy. Anderson may be the guy. I mean, there's a ton of those guys out there. We were at 2 months ago we were talking about cornerback. We haven't mentioned that at all lately. Nobody has.
But it's something we still have to keep an eye on. You know the roster as well as anybody does. After most of free agency has passed, we now know how the Lions are set up going into the 2023 draft. A number of players are going to be free agents after the 2023 season. So the roster going forward after this year will have a lot of opportunities for changes as well. So I guess the first question here is, how do you balance drafting for the needs for this year's roster to improve our chances this season while also keeping an eye on that future?
Yeah, well, I think that's the same thing too. We talked about you're trying to develop depth as well as you're trying to develop starters, and of course, if you can get a sure hit starter coming out of the draft, it's a lot cheaper than going out on the free agency and buying somebody, that could do the same, have the same stats and things like that. So I think that's one of the things that they're gonna look at, and again, you have to make sure the culture is great, and I think our culture is is great. So we're going to keep some of those guys around too, if that aren't going to test the free agent market. And I think we're drafting guys that want to be a part of this program and want to be a part of the chance to get to the Super Bowl and not as much about a paycheck. And I think, eventually that's all going to work itself out. So, it's so hard. That's that balance. If I had the spreadsheet in front of me, they have those big boards and they're looking at them right now saying, okay, if this happens, we lose this guy next year, will this guy fit in and stuff like that. So, or we can let him go because somebody just took his place.
Well, and you said it right there. Just because they're free agents next year doesn't mean they don't want to come back
right.
and sign with us. So it's not like you always have to draft to replace. Now, you do want to continue to draft because, as we talked about that, take this. Odell Beckham Jr. recently signed with Baltimore for $15 million guaranteed.
Yep.
Right? If you take Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Khalif Raymond, Josh Reynolds, and Quintus Cephas, their salary combined, $14.1 million. So, because of drafting well.
Strength in numbers. Yes.
So that plays into drafting well.
Yes.
Because, we know that St. Brown's going to get a big contract when he finishes his rookie deal.
Right.
But you want to continue to balance those things out. So you're not overpaying for a free agent to come here. Because Detroit used to have to do that in the past. And now we're at the spot where we don't have to overpay.
Right.
We're going to get the right guy to be the right fit.
Right.
And it's got to make sense all the way.
Yes. And OBJ, go back to that. Is that a ploy by the Ravens to keep Lamar?
So, okay, the Lions have 5 picks in the first 3 rounds.
Mm-hmm.
What are 2 or 3 positions that you think the Lions need to address most, or you're hoping that they're going to address in these first 5 picks?
Well, I think the D-line is still something that we need to do. And again, if you have a strong defensive line, your linebackers are going to play well, your corners and safeties are going to play well, and so I still think that's one of them they're going to go after. Offensive line, I think we need one, for sure, somewhere in that area. We talk about wide receiver. Is there any wide? But I've been reading a lot where the wide receiver class is pretty low. There's only 4 or 5 guys that are projected to be drafted, higher. Anyways, so I think those are a couple needs we want. Quarterback, I still think is a big one, but I think that's down. I think it looks like they're attacking the defense right now, and I think that's where they're going to go. And I think, again, they're going to take the best available player, or they may package something to get the player they want to help that defense.
Yeah, I hear you on the D-line. That seems to be something that the Lions want to build up. I guess I'm hoping more we go inside D-line.
Yes, for sure.
D-line,
yes.
Because if we grab, even if it's a great player on the outside, it's one more person in a rotation that we already have a pretty deep rotation on, where we need more help in the middle. So if it's Jalen Carter, that would be amazing. There's a guy like Tyree Wilson. He could be interesting. I do see them going something with the D-line. The offensive line is something that I don't think enough people have talked about. You brought it up, and I think it's right. We've got all of our guards' contracts are up at the end of this year.
Right.
You do need to add somebody to the offensive line. I don't know that that's a first-round draft pick. It might be a second one, but I definitely think it needs to be addressed in the first 3 rounds this year. What about running back? Let's talk about running back. We recently signed David Montgomery.
Right.
It's a 2-year deal, basically a 3-year deal, but 2 years guaranteed. They also have DeAndre Swift for another year, but we know we need to add somebody. I feel like we need to add somebody within the first 3 rounds. The question is 18, if Bijan Robinson's still there at 18, I don't know if he will be, but if he's there, do you like that pick at 18? Or do you feel more comfortable taking a running back in day 2 or 3?
I like day 2 or 3. The biggest thing is with running backs, and Robinson is he's unbelievable. I don't think he'll be there at 18, but I think day 2 or day 3. And again, you have to look at those running backs. One of the things they talk about with running backs when they're picking them is how many carries did they have in college, and that's the biggest thing. Does Robinson have a ton of carries in college? How long is his body going to last? How long are they going to be able to do it? You look at our running backs right now. We could, on paper right now, we could have one of the best tandem in the NFL, or in the top 3 for sure. And if Swift stays healthy and Montgomery's a player, we're going to be pretty solid right there. So, it could be better to take one in a later round as that backup concept, or somebody that's got to develop. So I just don't think first round. I think we have higher needs in the first round than running back.
Yeah, I would I just want to see them take somebody in the first 3 rounds.
Yes.
I think I would react if they took Bijan Robinson, if he's there at 18 and they took him, I would probably react the way I did last year when we traded up and got Jamison Williams.
Right.
That came out of left field. Did we just do that?
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting us going for a wide receiver after we had signed Shark. And though he didn't contribute, we were all super excited about the pick and about the future. I think second round would be a great spot to get a running back. There's a guy, there's a few guys out there. You got Jahmyr Gibbs and a couple of others that are in that second tier wave. And I think with Swift in his final year and his health concerns, you add another talented guy to that group.
Yeah.
And I think we're in that top 3.
For sure.
So Will Anderson, he plays more outside than inside, but he could be the best pick out there. Him and Jalen Carter are the top 2. There's very little question he's going to go in the top 5 or 6.
Right.
Most people don't think he'll last to 6.
Right.
Would you trade up to try to get him?
It depends what the cost is. It really depends what the cost is. I mean, I think he can play some inside also. He's big enough. He's long enough. They could put some weight on him. A lot of them are going to those quick guys. We got the pluggers. We got plugs on the team right now with Bugs and those guys. And so I think that's, could be, if the pick's not too high to get to him, then grab him. Again, the biggest thing is how Carter pans out, and we keep talking about those two, but there's some pretty good D linemen out there that I watched in the Senior Bowl and some of the bowl games and at the combines, that were, are they going to be ended up better? Look at our 6th round picks. Again, we got some guys. So if it doesn't cost too much, go get him if that's what Mr. Holmes and Coach Campbell believes is going to help the team be better.
Well, you said it, like Brian Breesy, Mozzie Smith. Those are some guys that could be available at 18, should be available at 18. And they're still very good players. So my hope is somehow there's like the 4th quarterback on the board, and there's a team that wants a quarterback, and we can move back just 4 to 6 spots.
Yes.
We pick up an extra pick or 2, 2nd, 3rd round pick, I don't know what it is, and then we draft somebody at that 10 or 11 or 12 spot, and then we still have our 18th, and we pick up something extra because there is so much talent early on. I don't like trading up unless you somehow get the incredible deal like we got last year. We did not pay that much to move up and get Jamison Williams.
Analytics will take care of that.
So you've had some college experience as well, working with teams and being around college players, and I know you've kept your eye on the college game quite a bit. Are there any players that you like coming out? Like you've talked about some defensive tackles, some different running backs. Are there any players coming out you're like this is a guy, not just a position the Lions need, but like this is a guy that I like this guy out of like all the defensive backs are out of a certain position?
I mean, Iowa has a few for sure. The linebacker, Northwestern's D lineman. I'm just intrigued. He had a great bowl game. He tested well. He's pretty smart, so he can pick up a lot of schemes. But I think he's one of my favorite guys that I look at, and just watching him at the bowl game. Anyways, he's big, he's long, he's athletic, and he's got a pretty good motor. And I think he's one of the ones that I look at going, man, he'd be a nice one to get. Kind of one of the ones flying under the radar.
Well, going over to the pass catchers, we mentioned wide receiver. I don't think they'll go early on wide receiver. I don't think there's a need to. But if there's somebody talented there late, in like the 4th or 5th round, I don't think we have a 4th round pick this year right now, but things can change. But I wouldn't mind them taking a flyer on somebody later. But let's talk about tight ends a minute. I've gone back and forth on this. When I've been at the end of the spectrum that says we don't need to mess with the tight end room.
Right.
We're totally good where we are. Then I went to the, hey, if we can add a really talented player here, we should do that.
Right.
I think I finally settled on the spot that I don't want us to take somebody in the first round. Not even at 18, not even at 20. If there's a great option late in the 2nd round or something, or early in the 3rd, I think that's something to consider. I thought maybe the late 1st round could be worth exploring, but at this point, I don't think so. I also think James Mitchell still has a lot of potential to recruit.
Yes.
When he was coming off an injury from college, plus learning his first NFL season, you put both of those things behind him, he actually has the potential for a pretty good-sized jump here in his 2nd NFL season. So what are you thinking on tight end?
I mean, I agree with that too. Michael Mayer. There's got the guy from Georgia, just a freak. And again, I think here it's a late round. We got away with it last year. With the three guys after we lost Hawk, and I think those are things that we can make do with those guys. Mitchell, I totally agree with you. He came off an injury. He's going to have all that off-season training and with the playbook and stuff like that, and he's pretty talented. So, again, late in the rounds, if we really need a backup, we need a pass catcher, we need a blocker, whichever way they're looking at it, then yeah, you can go get one. Again, that's going to be what's available on the board. If that's the best player available on the Detroit Lions board, they're going to take him, whether it's a tight end or a corner or whatnot.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, right? We heard they don't have a depth chart in their draft room, right?
Right.
They're going for best available.
Yeah.
And that makes sense. It's so nice to actually be at a spot where we're not just trying to plug holes necessarily. Mm-hmm. We're adding for the best quality player to the team.
Right. Yes, for sure. And that's what they're looking at. And I think they're going to take the best available player, and they'll figure out how he's going to help the team.
For much of the offseason, the Lions were projected to take a defensive back in the first round. They signed a number of free agents, so some of the need went away for that. But the trading of Jeff Okudah to Atlanta for the 5th-round pick reopens that door a little bit. I still think that they planned on drafting a defensive back early, considering how many guys are under contract next year as well. But again, the trade of Jeff Okudah does increase the chance of the Lions taking somebody early. So that's also going to be something to keep an eye on. All right, well, hey, are there any final thoughts you have as we inch closer to this NFL draft?
Just looking forward to it. It's getting close. It's this stuff's going to start picking up. I did remember the guy's name from Northwestern. It's I'm not even going to try to say it. We'll just call him A squared. Okay. So I'm looking forward to the draft, because we talk about these things and everybody's talking about what are they going to draft, who they take, and I just can't wait to see that first pick they make.
It's going to be exciting and see whether 3 or 4 quarterbacks go in front of them, how that impacts us. And it'll be awesome to keep our eye on. Well, great having you on the show always as we analyze the Detroit Lions.
Yes, I enjoy doing it as usual, and we can talk about them daily if we want.
Thank you so much for tuning in, folks. Please subscribe to Not the Same Old Lions podcast to get alerts about new episodes, and also follow the show on Twitter @Matt Soltesiak. And until next time, stay gritty, my friends.